Go ahead, and we are now live. So if you are watching online, you will notice that, yes, you do have a little bit different picture. And the reason for that, you will eventually, that the reason for that is that this particular class is very, very visually necessary. So that's why we have a picture-in-picture for you guys. And I ran out of time to really make it nice. So it's functional, and I'm also doing a little bit different with the microphone. So Michael, Wendy, if you've got this, if you could send a message to Sandy that she can let us know how the sound is. I'm running a different microphone up front. So we may have a little bit of booming just because we're in a room that booms. So what's that? Stephanie says got it. Oh, good. Okay. So all that out of the way to say welcome to the next installment of Bible 101. So we're doing a series on apologetics, okay? And I've talked about this before, that the way I learned apologetics was with Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. Did anybody read that book? Yeah, and then there was More Evidence That Demands a Verdict, More Than a Carpenter. I had both of those, actually. More Than a Carpenter. And when I was growing up and when I was coming up in the church, that the way we would do apologetics, the way you would talk to other people about God and about, things, whether they're true or not, is that we would make incredible arguments about the reliability of the Bible. And so we would go through all of the manuscript evidence behind it. And we would talk about the fact that there's, how many, for example, people doubt what it says in the Bible, even if the Bible was written, right? I've heard many people say that, how do we know that it was, that it was written? And I asked a question. Does anybody question the fact that Socrates existed? I've read his works. Does anybody question the fact that Socrates existed? And I would say, well, no, of course not. I said, well, do you know how many manuscripts that we have of Socrates, of anything that comes close to what he wrote? 0. Socrates existed in the mind of Plato. All we have about Socrates is written from Plato. There is nothing even close to it true. There's no copies of anything that Socrates wrote. And so I'd also ask a question about, Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, for example. That how do we know that Homer wrote it? Well, because we know that Homer wrote it. I said, but how do we know that? Well, we have manuscripts. I said, okay, well, how many manuscripts? We got a bunches of them. Well, no, we don't. We have less than 100. What is the age span between the writings of Homer, for example, and the manuscripts that we have? We're talking many, many hundreds of years. Okay, so the thing is, all of these things in antiquity, that Caesar's Gallic Wars, we can go on and on. All of these things that we don't question about in antiquity actually has very little evidence. If we were to take the same evidence as some skeptics would take toward the Bible, we would have to throw them all out. We can go, again, Plato, Aristotle, Plutarch, all of those main guys. We're talking hundreds of years in between them. And I would talk about the fact that John, for example, that John finished his gospel in the second half of the first century, and we have manuscripts, portions of the Gospel of John from somewhere around 100 AD. So we're talking anywhere from 40 to 50 years, which in antiquity is nothing. And then we start taking a look at how many manuscripts that we have and so on. And we're talking in the New Testament, we are talking literally in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands. Okay, they had so many that the Byzantine family that the Textus Receptus comes from which we get our King James Version and our New King James Version, they had so many manuscripts that one winter somebody was actually burning them to stay warm. And then somebody else came in and said, "What are you doing?" "I'm just burning this old paper." Well, that old paper happened to be manuscripts of the New Testament. Okay, so they're just, and I would talk to them about that, and that meant a lot. They would go, oh, wow. And then I would show them things, and folks would go, wow, that's really interesting. And then we would start to talk about Jesus. And what I found over the years is that today nobody cares about that. I mean, if it's not on Wikipedia, it didn't happen. And if it doesn't show up on whichever news group that you would like, whether it's, Fox on one side, CNN on the other, that if it doesn't show up on that, I'm not going to listen to it. And as I just had somebody just a couple of weeks ago in my office when we were talking about something said, Dan, I don't care about the facts. And at least the person was honest. But that's kind of the world in which we're dealing with.
I'm sorry. They didn't care about the truth of that.
Person told me I'm not going to argue them with you because I know I can't and I really don't care. This is almost a direct quote. So, but the point is that's the world in which we live. Okay? And so what I stumbled on this when I was Bruce Morton a number of years ago. I just looked back, man, it was like 2014, 2015. I would do this like 3-4 times a year up until COVID hit. And he's in charge of the Earth Sciences Department at Goodwin College. And so he teaches a freshman science class that is one of their prerequisites. It's one of the classes that you have to take. So it doesn't have to be that particular one, but it's an intro to science class. And so, and he was trying to get his students to kind of expand their minds and to think about things beyond just what they were told. And so he asked me if I would come in and if I would talk about creation and evolution. So I came in the first time, and I had the dean there. I had all kinds of people there. And apparently it was a good enough presentation that nobody threw anything at me and life was good there, and they invited me back. But I began to realize as I was in there talking to these kids that I made absolutely no difference whatsoever in their lives. None whatsoever. I had interesting things to say. I had things that I think would keep a brain going, but really nobody cared. And so I started to tweak the talk a little bit. And so I ended up with what we're going to be talking about today. So he still wanted me to talk about creation, evolution. But what I began to realize as I was talking to these students is that we actually had an underlying problem that was going to affect them for all of their school years. Because unfortunately, since really about the 1990s, public education no longer really teaches kids how to think. They actually don't even want kids to think. They tell kids what to think, and their job is to parrot back what the teachers told them. And so we do more indoctrinating today than what we do teaching. And then when kids get into college, they don't know what to do, especially if they go to one, and most colleges today do the same thing. But I know that when I went to Multnomah in the 90s, we had students that didn't know how to think. That they would parrot back what the teacher had told them, and they were told, I didn't ask you what I thought. And I found myself in that. I was taking a Bible perspectives class. Dr. Ray Lubeck was the prof. The first test was a test on, we were looking at the story inside the Bible. We talked about that in Bible 101, right? The story of the Bible is will God keep his promises to those people who don't deserve his goodness. And so he went through each of the sections of the scriptures. And I was remembering what it was like when I was in the Army and what it was like when I was in high school. I gave him on an essay question, almost word for word, what he told us. I have a good memory. I remember things like that. The series that we did on the attributes of God, I was able to tell many of the illustrations that Mr. Needham had that impacted me so much. I can tell those illustrations almost word for word even today. And I took that class back in 1991. So the thing is that, and so I got a C+ on the test. On the essays, I missed nothing on the first part. Okay, now you'll know I'm very competitive. So for me getting less than an A in a Bible class was rough. And so I ended up getting like a C something on the test because I bombed the essay questions. And I remember going up to him afterwards, and I said, Ray, I don't get this. He says, what do you mean? I said, I gave you word for word, almost word for word, what you told us in class. He said, yeah, I know you did. I said, then why did you bomb me on this thing? He said, I didn't ask you what I thought. I asked you what you thought. Now, I took the entire semester to bring that grade up. I ended up with an A in the class. As a 93 was an A when I was in school. It took me the entire semester to bring that stupid thing up. I ended up with like a 93.8 or something. He said, I would give me an A anyway. But the point was that I learned a lot that day because and I learned that all the way through school was that I finally realized that here I'm at the school, they wanted to know what I thought. And so I remember my junior year, I was taking a hermeneutology, angiology, and anthropology class. And my professor was one of the founders of Multnomah, Willard Aldrich. It was the last class he ever taught. And so in that class, I learned nothing from him on angiology, anthropology, hermeneutology. Because all he would do for the entire class period, he would just try to pour out his heart to us about how good God is. And he told us incredible stories. I mean, amazing stories of how God provided for them and how, I mean, he took an entire semester that he drove from Camas, Washington to the west side of Portland on one tank of gas. He actually put a piece of paper over his gas tank that said full because he couldn't afford to put gas in the car. And so he drove an entire semester on that tank of gas. And so he tried to put this up. So some friends of mine and I, we would go to the coffee shop and we would go over the class notes. And then I realized that we missed more classes than we were allowed. So I remember going up to him and said, Dr. Will, I got a problem. He said, well, what's the problem? I said, well, we've missed so many classes that technically we should not get credit for this class. So he says, so what did you do when you were gone? I said, we were in the coffee shop talking over the notes and talking the stuff over. So he said, well, how are you guys doing? I said, well, I'm number one in the class, and Doug here is number two, and I can't remember who the third guy was. He was number three, so you guys are doing okay, so he gave us credit. But I remember I turned in a paper from Ephesians chapter 2, and the question I had to deal with was how dead is dead in Ephesians chapter 2. You know, we were dead in our transgressions and sins. I had to write a paper on how dead is dead. And so I concluded that dead was dead. That we were not going through we were going through the pockets. We're getting all the loose change. This person is now mostly dead. This person is dead. And so I remember that he walks into class one day and we all sit down and we're all waiting to hear something brilliant from him. And he starts off by saying, I just got this paper. Class, what's wrong with this paper? And then he reads mine. And so I got all this stuff going back and forth about all the things I did wrong on this paper. And so I finally raised my hand. I said, Dr. Willard, I think it's a brilliantly written paper. I think the argument is absolutely undeniable and fantastic. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, I am so toast. I got it back with an A+. And but the thing was that we were encouraged to think, but the problem is most people today are not. And so, and we see that in our world today. I mean, just if you follow social media, well, you'll get to do a lot next year. And so that some of the stuff that just comes out there is vile. I mean, oh my goodness, that it is just absolutely disgusting. Some of the comments on either side of the aisle. So I mean, this is not just one side or another. This is on either side of the aisle. It's just really some heinous stuff out there. I think the reason is because of what we're going to talk about tonight. And so all that intro to come up, that this is the bedrock of what we're going to talk about. So when we're looking at apologetics in this series, my goal is to use what we're going to talk about here as the foundation. And we're going to use the creation evolution debate tonight as a springboard. But I want to end the night by looking at about how important this is in our daily life even today. And I would argue that it's killing hundreds of thousands of people, if not more, across our world today because of what we're going to talk about tonight. So the idea of truth versus certainty. Are we searching for truth, or do we want to have certainty? Now, Webster defines something certain as something that is fixed or settled, something that a person holds on to no matter what. So what would be some examples of certainty that something that people hold on to no matter what? Just maybe we can do that throughout history. Gravity? Okay.
Things are going to fall.
Things are going to fall. If you got cats, you definitely know that. Yes. Or if you work with kids in Mastering Motherhood, you know that gravity does work. We prove it every week. So what else? Things that people know that we're certain of. Okay, if you live in London or if you live in Portland, Oregon, you're certain it's going to rain sometime. Well, my joke was 2% chance of rain when we had the 70 straight days of rain. So I'm certain the sun will come up tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there will be sun. And but they'll think about it. How about throughout life? Some of the things that in the past that people were certain of. I can remember hearing when I was in school, people were certain that the appendix was a vestigial organ. Remember that? We're all old enough for that. That you don't need the appendix. It's a vestigial organ.
It was for digesting water.
Yes. Until recently they found out that the appendix is actually part of the immune system. It's a place where your good bacteria goes to hide when bad things come up so they can get stronger and go out, and it can go out and fight for you. Some of the T cell stuff that we're looking about today, that the appendix has something to do with that. As we're all a little bit on the plus side of 15, so that when I grew up is that you start having sore throats and all that, the tonsils come out. That was a big deal. I don't have my tonsils. Well, because the tonsils were vestigial. We don't need them. And then they found out that tonsils are also a part of the immune system. And so there was a time where people were certain that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of vestigial organs. Right now, in the scientific community, those that actually practice science, which are very few anymore today, that there are less than a handful. And basically they just decided we don't know what it is. I can remember a good friend of mine who, a guy by the name of Matt Jenks. He's a horticulturalist. That he unlocked the key. He and his team unlocked the key to drought-resistant plants, and he started to do work on the wax on plants. And he had a hard time getting grants. Now, he couldn't tell people why he was doing it, because we all knew that wax on plants is vestigial. It's a part of the evolutionary process. But Matt, as a Christian, his theory was, and he's a creationist, he says, if God created it, it must have a purpose. We just don't know what that purpose is, so let's go ahead and see if we can find that purpose. So he and his team, postdocs and so on, started working on this. He had a hard time getting funding. And from this, they found out that the wax on plants actually keeps them, helps keep moisture in. So they unlocked the key to drought-resistant crops by looking at the wax on plants. So the point is that so many people throughout the course of history were lambasted because of what people knew for certain. Okay, that would be, we're talking Magellan, we're talking about, go way back. Galileo, yes. I mean, that Copernicus, as I used to tell my kids all the time, Copernicus called, you're not the center of the universe. No matter what a teenager tells you, what a cat tells you, they're not the center of the universe. And they because people were certain about that. Okay, and so it was fixed and it was settled and it was something people held on to no matter what. And so what happened was you had a lot of these people who were searching for truth who got in a lot of trouble because they were actually pushing the envelope and they were saying, what if you're wrong?
Well, in some of their cases, they were saying, I know you're wrong.
Yes.
And that was a little more in your face.
Yeah, and the thing is, most of them were out there. They were actually Christians. They were going by and we'll talk about. We're going to do a series on what happened. What if the Bible is true? And so, as opposed to trying to prove the Bible is true, we're going to start with, well, what if it is? What would we expect to see? So, anyway, so from this fighting back and forth for throughout the Enlightenment period, and folks came up with what we know as the scientific method. And we have to have something, right? And so they came up with a scientific method. And anybody remember, I have it on the board here, but from way back in your days in school, when you were taking copious notes in your science classes, what is the scientific method? Or you can read it from up here, either way.
State the problem.
Uh-huh.
Gather information.
Uh-huh.
Form a hypothesis.
Yes.
Test it.
Yep.
Record and analyze data.
Uh-huh.
Conclusion.
State the conclusion and repeat the work. Absolutely. The scientific method is an amazing thing. The scientific method got us microphones that don't always work. The scientific method got computers that I fight with all the time. The scientific method gave us microwave popcorn. They gave us microwaves. They gave us, all kinds of incredible things. But is the scientific method the end all? Okay, let me ask this question. What's that? It is, because by the scientific method, I ask students this all the time. By the scientific method, can you prove that each person who walked into this room walked in through those doors? No, you can't. You can prove that it's possible. You can prove that it is preferable, especially if it's raining outside. You can prove that it's reasonable, but you cannot use the scientific method to prove that. And the reason for that is because it only happened one time. So you cannot repeat something that happened in history. Okay, so the scientific method, as great as it is, and I talk to people like, can you prove that love exists scientifically with the scientific method? No, you can't. Can you prove that the intellect is here, that the mind is here? No, you can't. You can observe things, but you cannot use the scientific method. Other question I ask, okay, if this is true, can you use the scientific method to prove the origin of the universe? And the answer to that is no. You would have to be able to repeat it. So we have another kind of science, historical science, that you will never hear in a secular textbook. Even though they deal with it all the time, the problem is that gets in the way. And we'll talk about why that is here in just a second. So when you're looking at something that happened in the past, and again, you can't prove by the scientific method that Washington crossed the Delaware. You can't do it, okay? I mean, you cannot prove by the scientific method that Nelson won the Battle of Trafalgar, because you'd have to repeat it, and he's dead. You can't do that, and so everybody else they fought. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean it's not scientific. Just means you can't use a scientific method to do it. So what happens is when you're looking at things in the past, and historians do this all the time. I'm a historian. That I'm upfront about the fact that I have a narrative when I am teaching something, when I am reading something. I do have a narrative that I am trying to get across. I tell the students this, even when I'm talking here. I have a narrative for tonight. I have a goal for tonight. And I tell all the students, I said, my goal is not, believe it or not, to turn you all into young earth creationists. That is not my goal tonight. My goal is to get you thinking about this particular issue because it's going to affect you for all of your life. And so at the end of the class, I'll talk about how this affects them in criminal justice, how it affects them in early childhood development, whatever it is that they're going into life, why this is so important. I said, so that's my goal. So when we're looking at, and that's my goal this evening as well, is that because when we're talking to people about Jesus, when we're talking about apologetics, we have to decide something first off before we go anywhere else. Am I having a conversation with somebody who is actually concerned about the truth? When I'm talking to somebody who is actually concerned about the truth, I can have an incredible conversation. A lot of times I learn things. A lot of times I may change. It may be nuanced, but a lot of times I may change. Sometimes they may change. That may be nuanced as well. And even if we don't agree at the end, we could still get along. And so, which would be the difference behind the diatribes that happen on social media versus two people actually having a conversation? So this really is an important issue. And when we start to look at the world around us, we need to understand something and this is, a lot of people don't realize this, that creationists and evolutionists have the same facts. There are no creation rock layers and evolutionary rock layers. There are no creation fossils and evolutionary fossils. Creation shells and whatever, and strata and all that kind of stuff. They're both the same. But the problem is, even though both sides have the same data, they come up with very different conclusions. And the question is why? Well, the reason is because it's our perspective. Our perspective matters. I mean, is this a vase or a vase or whatever we call this thing? Or is this two faces looking at each other? Depends on your perspective. Depends on the day of the week. Depends on how bad my day is. And so often that happens in the world too, is the fact that I've had people ask me, says, Dan, it's all right here. Why don't you believe that? I said, because I have a different set of assumptions going in. And I'm asking you the exact same question. It's all right here. Why can't you see it? Have you ever had a conversation with somebody like that? I mean, anything.
Probably when I was in England with a friend of mine who was saying that there's got to be other planets and there's got to be, and God is fighting with the devil and just let them get on with it.
Yeah, and we can. Well, yeah, or even, I mean, it doesn't even have to be on that. It could be on pretty much anything. It could be on, I've had people. I'm a baseball player. Okay, I think that Bob Feller was the greatest right-hander to ever play the game, and not just because he's family, because he's the only guy that ever threw a no-hitter on opening day. He pitched 3 innings in the minor leagues, and that was it. And he spent the best of the years of his career in the Army. And but the thing was, I think he was the best. And I had many arguments over that. And so Sandy Koufax, or it's this, and we're looking at say, you're looking at this, how can you not see this? And he'll say, Dan, you're looking at this, how can you not see this? Or, the cats or dogs are better, the same thing. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be something really deep. Sometimes it's just kind of how we look at things. What's that? Oh, never.
I'm being deliberately subtle. My wife is on the other side.
Stephanie, he's saying he loves you. That's what I just heard him say. So yeah, and so the thing is that perspective matters. Okay, so I want to take a look at the things now. As a creationist, I tell people all the time. Okay, my job is actually pretty easy. Okay, I assume that God is here. Okay, that is the assumption that I'm making. I'm making one assumption. Everybody makes assumptions. I don't run from that. This is where I start, is that God exists. If God exists, I don't have a whole lot to answer for. God said, let there be light, and there was light. How did light get here? God said so. That God said, let the fish swim in the sea. How did the fish get here? God said, let there be fish. So on that, and I'm not really upfront about that. I don't have a lot of jumps to make because of the one assumption that I'm making. Okay, now for an evolutionist, they also have to make an assumption. Their assumption is that God does not exist. That there is nothing outside of what's here. What's here in this world is all there is. Okay, so that's the fundamental difference between the two. That's the vase versus the faces. And so when we take a look at the data, we come up, because of our assumptions, we come up with very different conclusions, even though we look at the same data. Again, now for me, it's not that big a deal. How did the stuff get here? Because God put it here. And people get mad at me about the God of the gaps or whatever, and I had no issue with that at all. I said, you're right. I'll own that. So you don't have to make fun of me on that. I'm giving you that. I said, well, let's take a look at the assumptions that you have to make. Because there are three. There are three main assumptions that anybody who holds to an evolutionary or a naturalistic understanding have to make. Without these three assumptions, nothing happens. Okay? If these are not true, the whole darn opera falls apart. The first one is that matter is eternal. In other words, that something came out of nothing. Even the Big Bang, where did that come from? I asked the question. Well, first there was nothing and then there was something. I said, okay, we can go. I said, that's an assumption that you're making. Own that. And I've had friends who will do that. They'll say, yeah. I said, is it rational? No, it's not rational. It's not reasonable at all. Oh, okay. But again, I see what's out there. And so therefore, because again, that I see something out there, there has to be a reason for it. So that matter is eternal. Something came from nothing. The next assumption they have to make is that life had to come from non-life. That's kind of the goo to you via the zoo kind of thing. That I stole that from Jonathan Sarfati. But the thing is that life had to come from non-life. First, you had a single-cell organism. How that got here, we don't know. Then it became a double-cell organism. Then it became a triple-cell organism, and it just kept going on and on and on. Got stronger and stronger, and so on. And then all of a sudden, you had life. That's an assumption. Have you ever seen that? Never seen it. Is it reasonable? No. And all this has to happen by itself because there is no God outside of there. And I've had people ask me, well, Dan, you say that life came from non-life. I said, no, I don't. Well, where did God come from then? And I looked at them as nicely as I can say, it's actually not relevant. Well, what do you mean? I said, because God, by definition, is outside of this creation. So God can speak into this creation because he's already outside of it. And so we think of existence as something that has to do with time. It's lineal, right? It's a point A to point B. You can't get it back. Well, God lives outside of time. I don't have an issue there. So where God came from, that is actually, that has no bearing whatsoever. Because we're thinking in bit of time. Now, they're forced to. They don't have a choice. Okay? I do. By definition, God is the creator. He is outside of life looking. He's outside of this creation looking in. I don't have any logical problem there at all. And then the third one, and this is important that we're dealing with even today, and that is that there needs to be new information added to the genome. In other words, things become more complicated. Okay, we're dealing with that right now with the coronavirus. It's getting stronger. No, it's not. It's losing information. It's not gaining information. It's losing it. That's how we have antibiotic-resistant bacteria. It's getting stronger. No, it's not. What happens is that the antibiotic goes against a protein in the bacteria, and it kills the protein, which kills the bacteria. When it loses the protein that the bacteria goes up against, it no longer kills the bacteria. The bacteria did not get strong. It didn't gain anything. It lost it. We're finding that with the therapeutics that we have today. That is a fact that works on one spike protein, the alpha one. And it did a pretty good job. Therapeutically. It's never been a vaccine. Not until the CDC changed the definition of a vaccine in September was it ever one. It was always been a therapeutic. But it wasn't bad. It dealt with one spike protein. And then what happened? Delta came along. And the narrow spike protein of the original doesn't work here. Why is that? Because Delta doesn't have the spike that the alpha spike that it actually killed. That's one of the reasons why it doesn't work. And it just so the thing is that, but it's because things are losing information, not because they're gaining it. I've had many conversations with many people. Well, this is getting stronger. It doesn't mean it's not more virulent. That's why, I mean, SARS-CoV-1, that was a killer a number of years ago, is still here. We call it the common cold. It's the exact same virus. It just gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. Why is that? It's called genetic entropy. I'm actually going to have a talk. I'm going to have somebody do that talk for us that we'll talk about afterwards because it really is important. So, Richard Dawkins, who is who hates people like me, that he was asked, the great scientist, right? Richard Dawkins. So let's hear his own words.
Can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an
Let's
evolution
let him go.
process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Can you just stop when I think?
Yeah, stop the tape. Yeah, okay. That's kind of that's the best I can get the volume. I'm sorry. So that's why it's written across. But can you give an example where new information has been added to the genome? His answer was honest. No, there aren't. There's not one scientist out there. Only in a Stephen King novel or on CNN will you see that happening. Never in real life. They don't get stronger. Things break down. Again, that doesn't mean it's not more virulent. It does not mean that it may even become more deadly. That doesn't mean that at all. It just means it's losing information. So, and again, that's been the history, at least for viruses, for 6,000 years, up until a year and a half ago. That things, they just kind of go from place to place. They get weaker and weaker as you go along, and then it's gone. But these are three assumptions that need to be made. And I ask people all the time, can you give me examples under these? Well, no, I can't. I said, so I'm going to ask you to do this. Okay, don't mock me for the God of the gaps, because you have a God of the gaps as well. Yours are just a whole lot harder to support than mine is. And so the point is that as we're looking at things, people are looking at things differently, and depending on how married you are, if I can use the word, or how solid you are in your conviction of the underlying understanding, no matter what data you see or no matter what facts you see, it's going to have an impact. Okay, and let's walk our way through this. There are some things that we know to be true in life. That, first of all, is that for every cause, there must be an effect. Law of cause and effect, right? That if I'm going 75 and a 25, the law of cause and effect says that if there's a policeman close by, I will probably get stopped. That if I kick the wall, the law of cause and effect says I will probably hurt. If you get into a fight with a kangaroo, you'll probably lose. Okay, so I mean, the cause of the law of cause and effect is there. So I asked a question to many people about this, and so I want you to. I'm going to put up and let's talk about it for a second. If you have one known cause for an effect, and if you have one effect without knowing the cause, and the only difference is the scope, what can we conclude? So if we're knowing the idea of cause and effect, If we have one known cause and one effect, right? And then we have another effect, but we don't know what the cause is for that effect, we should be able to logically conclude something. We should be able to conclude that the cause for the second effect is similar, and the difference would also be in scope, size or scope. Okay, so we can, so for, if I have a tree that has fallen down, a large tree, okay, then I watch Eric go out there with his trusty axe, and I see him take a small tree, and he takes that small tree, five whacks, that small tree is gone. And I have a large tree that's big, and if I'm looking at this thing on the ground, and I can see that it's got axe marks in it, okay, I should be able to conclude, logically anyway, it may not be true, but I can at least conclude something logically. At least it's reasonable to say that it took somebody, Eric or somebody else, a little bit longer to chop down the big tree than he did the small tree. Does that make sense? Okay, the only difference is, so I'm a similar cause, the difference was size and scope. Okay, now the reason this is important is because I'm showing you two canyons up on the screen. The one on the bottom, anybody know what the one on the bottom is? Yes, that would be the Grand Canyon. Yes, anybody ever been there? It's one of those places that actually takes your breath away. You cannot describe the Grand Canyon, it's too beautiful. Now what do we know about the Grand Canyon? You learn in books, right? It was, lots of years it came down to because the strata on it shows us, you can see the levels of the strata, and it shows us the Colorado River, how it carved it out over millions of years and all that, after it went up before coming back down, and so on, that's what I learned in school. And I learned that, and the reason for that is because it's got the islands in there, and it's got all of the lines. I don't know if I have a, it's not going to show up on there. Anyway, so it's got the lines on there, so you can see the strata built. So it had to take millions of years. Now, the one up on the upper side there is a canyon in Washington State. It is. It's known as the mini Grand Canyon. It has the river going through it, has the same islands that come up there. It has the exact same layers as the Grand Canyon. It's smaller than the Grand Canyon. So if I have those two effects, what should I conclude? It took this canyon here, how long would it have taken that one to maybe have eroded? Yeah, just a few, right? Yeah, give or take a day or two. You know how long it took? It took about 7 hours. Yeah, Mount St. Helens blew up. Mount St. Helens blew up. What they found out what you need? You don't need time. You know what you do need? You need a crap load of water. Going through there and taking it all out. And so the point is this, as I talk with, now Mount St. Helens, when it blew in 1980, I was still in high school, and we were hearing all kinds of great stuff we're going to learn from Mount St. Helens. And in 1992, we hear nothing from Mount St. Helens. And the problem is because Mount St. Helens is absolutely, completely blown away any kind of evolutionary understanding. That there is coal, there's peat under Spirit Lake, that, because how long does it take coal to form? Millions of years, right? No, it doesn't, actually. It just takes a couple of years. What you need is some pressure. And so on. And I hear this all the time, that the peat beds under Spirit Lake are different than the peat beds in Kentucky. I heard this one. I asked this guy, I said, dude, yeah, I'd expect that. Well, why? I said, where is Spirit Lake? It's in Washington State. Where are the peat beds in Kentucky? They're in Kentucky. Is Spirit Lake in Kentucky? No. Is the fauna the same in Washington State as it is in Kentucky? No. Then maybe they should be different. They're different because they're not in Kentucky. If you don't have the same vegetation, you can't have the same bit of peat beds if you don't have the same vegetation. I mean, that's logic. And we can go on. Petrified forest. Okay, I know I learned millions of years, right? I went to the petrified forest in California. How long it takes to make a petrified forest? It takes just a couple of hours. What you need is iron, you need minerals, and you need lots of water. So the thing is that you have two effects. You have a canyon in Washington, you have a canyon in Arizona. They are very similar. They both have the same lines on the walls. Different rocks, you would expect that. Different places in the country, there are different rocks around. Everything is the same, except for the scope. And so I ask people, isn't it reasonable? I'm not saying it's true. I'm asking, is it reasonable to say that the difference between the two, it has the same cause or similar causes. The difference is scope. Now, can anybody remember a little event that took place on this planet that threw a crap load of water all over the planet? Maybe a flood? Yeah, maybe Noah's flood. Maybe when the glaciers broke after the flood. Could that have done it? Yeah, it's very possible. It's reasonable. I wasn't there. My grandparents weren't there. There was nobody around who are around today who wrote down what they saw. We don't know. And so I ask people, I says, I don't care if you hold to the millions of years thing, but you need to look at the fact that you're holding it by faith, not by evidence. Because the evidence tells us that it's at least reasonable to say that it happened quickly. Because all of the other things that you're telling me have taken millions of years, petrified forests, peat beds, fossil fuels, all that kind of stuff, didn't take millions of years. In fact, it's really kind of sad that the one thing that, I'm not a big Obama fan by any stretch of the imagination, but he did do one thing that he unfortunately got talked into stopping. And that was looking at petroleum from seaweed. And it was brilliant. It's turned out to be true. And he wanted to put money into that. And on both sides of the aisle, they said no. Because it was cheap and it's renewable. And it's just, we would have, we may have fuel at only, I don't know, maybe $3 a gallon or something like that if we had that stuff now. But the point is that it really was kind of sad because you had scientific exploration. And so this is reasonable to look at. And they said no because they certainly wanted to make money from fossil fuels on all sides of the aisle. That's Dan's cynicism coming out. But it really is kind of sad. I would have liked to have known what would have happened had he been able to actually see that through. I think it would have been a good thing. So I bring this out because this is the meat of what I want to talk about, is that there are three things that take place when you're searching for certainty versus searching for truth. When you're searching for truth simply says, I'm going to take a look at the data, I'm going to take a look at everything in there, we're going to have a conversation, I'm going to try to find out what's there, and I am able to have my mind changed. Okay? When you're searching for certainty, when you're looking for certainty, it says that no, you can't do that. You're going to hold on to something no matter what. So as Ben Shapiro likes to say, facts don't care about feelings. I would actually turn that around and say feelings don't care about facts. And that's a true statement, no matter what side you're on, that if the feelings are strong enough, doesn't make any difference what facts are out there. that, and this is true. This is not a right-left thing. This is a fallen humanity thing. This is true. This is true across the board. But when you're searching for certainty, there's some things that'll happen. The first one is that you'll see things that don't exist. And Brent, next week I'll try to get you a better outline. Now that I know what to do with this, I won't waste 2 hours trying to put it together. So sorry about that. And when you're searching for certainty, you'll see things that don't exist. I'm going to give an example of that. That for many years, whale evolution was the kingpin of evolution. Okay, this was what everybody was holding on to. This definitively proves the idea of changing and transitional figures and so on, because we had to get rid of Tiktaalik because that one fell apart when Tiktaalik actually gave birth to his great-great-great-grandfather or something like that. There was a problem there. So, but whale evolution held on for a long time. So this is the best. Okay, I want to give the best that's out there. Now, Darwin believed that whales evolved from bears. And because bears they swim through the water, they have the teeth and that, they go after fish. And so he was convinced that whales evolved from bears. Okay, now, people in California were a little weird. Okay, free to admit that, from California, I own it. So they said, no, Darwin, you're wrong. They didn't evolve from bears, they actually evolved from hyena-type creatures. Only a Californian could come up with that. And it has a lot to do with the shape of the mouth and so on. So it must have been the ancestry must have been a hyena-type creature. Well, the Japanese, not to be outdone, they said, no, you're all wrong. It came from a hippo. Okay? And the reason is because you have some similarities in DNA. Okay? And so, I mean, there's similarities in DNA between a human being and a banana, too. So, there's not a whole lot of differences, okay? But the point is that so here's the thing. This is the best. We can't even figure out where this thing came from, okay? This is the best they have. So, and then, of course, from there, we end up getting this guy, and then ultimately, we end up with Shamu, if he'll actually show up over there. Come on. There we go. So we end up with the whale. So let's take a look at how this comes about, because this is fascinating. This is really fascinating. So let's take a look at Rhodocetus and so on.
From the University of Michigan Natural History Museum, Ambulocetus is one of the important transitional fossils in whale evolution. It is thought by some to be a walking whale.
Just in the last 5 or 10 years, we've had some remarkable discoveries of fossil whales. And in fact, there have been discoveries that have indicated that fossil whales had feet and actually walked on the land.
Recently, some evolution scientists have backed off the assertion that Ambulocetus was an ancestor of modern whales because its eyes are high up on the head, like an alligator's eyes, quite dissimilar from whales and land mammals.
Ambulocetus may be on a slight sideline, and we think that mostly because it's very strange. It has its eyes raised up on top of its head in a very strange way. And it's unusually large for an early whale. But mostly the eyes up on the top of the head seems like an unusual specialization. Maybe it's not on the main line.
Evolution scientists claim the most spectacular intermediate fossil in whale evolution is Rhodocetus, an animal with 4 legs, a whale's tail called a fluke, and flippers. It would swim using its widened tail fluke like a modern whale, but it had 4 legs like a land mammal. A perfect transitional fossil between land mammals and aquatic mammals, just as Darwin predicted.
The fossil whale that appears a little bit later is Rhodocetus, and this animal had large tail vertebrae that indicate there were lots of room for muscle attachment. So here we see the beginning of the type of locomotion that's characteristic of the modern whale, using just the tail flukes for propulsion and not using the hind limbs.
We have a complete modern whale-type structure in Rhodocetus. There are not many modifications from Rhodocetus to the modern whale other than changes in size of the structures.
When this video series was being filmed on location at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the executive producer noticed a discrepancy between museum drawings of Rhodositus and the fossils. The reconstruction of Rhodositus had a whale fluke, but there were no fossils of the tail to confirm this. Dr. Phil Gingrich, the scientist responsible for the discovery and reconstruction of Rhodositus, was questioned how he knew there was a whale fluke on Rhodositus, since that part of the fossil was missing.
What was the reasoning that the scientists think there was a fluke on Rhodositus based on the other pieces of anatomy?
Well, I told you we don't have the tail in Rhodositus, so we don't know for sure whether it had a ball vertebra indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated it might have had a fluke.
Scientist Gingrich also acknowledged that the flippers were drawn on the diagram without these fossils. Now, he does not believe this animal had flippers. Again, his answer was surprising, since the museum diagrams had flippers on Rhodositus.
Now, since then, we've found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arm, the arms, in other words, of Rhodositus. And we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers are on a whale. And if you don't have flippers, I don't think you can have a fluke tail in really powered swimming. And so I now doubt that Rhodositus would have had a fluke tail.
Many experts consider whales to be the best fossil evidence for evolution, but are unaware of these discrepancies. Opponents of evolution contend that whale evolution is nothing more than hopeful supposition. If museum diagrams are redrawn and corrected for various discrepancies, opponents argue that whale evolution is non-existent.
Yeah. How do we know it happened? We don't. We made it up. Yes?
This lines up perfectly with that thing that you showed us about Lucy.
Yeah, oh, I'm going to show it again. So, yes. It's in there. Yes. The point is this. You'll see things that don't exist. That, how do you know the tail was there? Well, I don't. I speculated. Now, I don't actually have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is the fact that it shows up in every science book. It shows up in the University of Michigan. This guy works at the University of Michigan, and he knows it's a lie. And they still put it out there, and people believe that it's true. Yeah, I'm sorry, you had your hand up?
Yeah, and the one thing at least I see him willing to do is integrate new information.
Gingrich is.
Yes.
The problem is he's not stopping the fact that it's still out there in the museums, in his own university. He's not going out there and saying this is wrong. Okay, and that's, I have issues with that. That they see things that don't exist. But they need that. Listen to the first scout from the university, from San Diego State University, where Jane graduated. My father graduated from there. My uncle was a professor there. It's a good school. Hanging on that. This is what it is, and it's a lie. It doesn't exist. Do scientists know this? Yes, they do. Do they still allow it to be out there? Yes, they do. It's dishonest and it's wrong. Well, let's just go. That's just whales, Dan. Okay? There has to be a whole bunch from how man came about. Well, let's go back through man. Okay, so we have this little guy, Egyptopithecus zeuxis. And they say this is a rather monkey-like skull of Egyptopithecus zeuxis, the first ape to emerge from the old world monkey stock. I love this. Some elements are partially restored. Yeah, that's what we have. So we all know what this guy looks like, right? Of course we do. It looks just like that. From this, we have this. Absolutely. Let's go on. We have a guy by the name of Dryopithecus africanus. Well, of course we know what this guy looks like, right? Absolutely. No question. Of course he looks just like this. Although somebody did decide that he was too committed to apedom to be a progenitor of man. Then we have my favorite, Ramapithecus brevirostris, whatever this guy is. This is what they found. That's it. Some teeth. So, of course, we know exactly what this guy looked like, right? I love this thing here. It says, on the right, the reconstruction of Ramapithecus, which because so few remains have been found, must remain very tentative. Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. From this, we get this. And people don't doubt it at all. If you want to make money in sciences, become an artist. And then we got this guy, this poor guy, he had a bad day. Kenyathropus platops. So from an exhaustive study, and the Nature article reveals, there's a total of 36 craniodental fossils, so some teeth, collected from 4 different locations over a period of 17 years, of which only 6 contain bone fragments. The authors describe their new finds as a well-preserved temporal bone, 2 partial maxilla, isolated teeth, and most importantly, a largely complete, although I will agree with this, distorted cranium. Yes. That's the page numbers of the books. Yeah, that's it, from 410 to 433. That's the section he's talking about. So of course, we know exactly what this guy looks like, right? He looks just like this. Right? The flat-faced man of Kenya. Yeah, thank you. Well, I have. So some of them just kind of throw me. They even get past me. So anyway, so they get. So the point is this: is that I mean, they throw this stuff out there, and people buy it. And then when you ask them the questions, why? Well, you're just questioning science. No, I'm not. I'm questioning the garbage you're throwing at me. Do you really know what this guy looks like? Well, we got Lucy. Lucy is in the sky with diamonds, right? Lucy, all right? Australopithecus afarensis. I have no idea if that's right or not, Steph, but that was for you. So, Australopithecus afarensis. Lucy. Now, this is what we found with Lucy. Okay? So, of course, we know what Lucy looked like. Lucy looked just like this. Or possibly like this, depending on which museum you're in. It changes. Lucy was discovered by Donald Johnson and Maitland Edney in 1981. We see this from Lucy from the Beginning of Mankind by Simon and Schuster. Now, there's some interesting things here. People were so excited about Lucy. We have finally found where humanity came from. Right here. Meet them. Embrace them. And so people went out there, and they're getting really excited to go out and look at him. And one guy writing for the San Diego Union Tribune, he went out and looked at it. This is what he said. March 29th, 2000, San Diego Tribune reported a chance discovery made by looking at a cast of the bones of Lucy. The most famous fossil of Australopithecus afarensis shows her wrists to be stiff, like a chimpanzee. This suggests that her ancestors walked on their knuckles. We never saw that before. My bad, never saw that. Stiff wrists. And then Peter Schmid, as he was looking at this is 1992, he said that when I started to put the skeleton together, I expected it to look human. Everyone had talked about Lucy being a very modern, very human. So I was surprised by what I saw. I noticed that the ribs were more round in cross-section, more like what you see in apes. Human ribs are flatter in cross-section. But the shape of the rib cage itself was the biggest surprise of all. The human rib cage is barrel-shaped. But I couldn't get Lucy's ribs to fit this kind of shape. But I could get them to make a conical-shaped rib cage like what you see in apes. So here's the question. Important question. Lucy. that we know that she was the progenitor of humanity. Why do we know this? Because the science tells us so. So she's got curved fingers and ape-like proportions. She's got locked wrists like an ape. She's got microwear on the teeth of a fruit eater. She's got a rib cage that's conical, not barrel-shaped. In other words, she looks like a chimp. She acts like a chimp. She walks like a chimp. So therefore, of course, she is the foundation of all of humanity. And then we have this other problem. We have the hip joint of a chimp. Now, this was a problem. Okay, because if our hip joints are upright, a chimp's would be down. Well, hers was, she had the hip joint of a chimp. Well, a guy by the whose last name is Lovejoy. This is from PBS. I'm going to show you something from PBS. This is not Dan going out there and cherry picking stuff on my side. This is the first the first episode of Nova. Okay, a PBS science thing, and they were dealing with the fact that Lucy had the hip joint of a chimp. This was a problem, but not insurmountable. Watch.
But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Okay, I got a comment, I'm sorry. You know, as a kid, when you had a puzzle, the pieces, you had to search for the right piece to fit together. You didn't, Mom, do you have the scissors? I'm trying to get this thing to fit. Here, son, that'll make that fit easier for you. And to hear them talk with such, but after some time and using the Craftsman Dremel tool, he was carefully able to match the pieces perfectly like they fit together for all time. No, I'm sorry, that's not true.
Yes. To quote our ancestors over the pond, he took a bloody saw to it. Used proper in a sentence.
Power tool.
Yeah, as I told the students, I said, does this bother anybody? And they looked at me like they were shocked. I said, yeah, he said he took a flipping saw to it. And, because this is what they said. The reason for that was that when right after Lucy died, a deer stepped on her. Because we all know that if a human being dies and if an ancient extinct deer steps on you, you look just like a chimp. And the point that's amazing to me, guys, is the fact that this is on Nova. They have no problem with that. Okay, this is not a gotcha moment. Neither was the Dawkins one. The Dawkins one, they just asked a question. It was a logical question based on all the things that they were saying. They asked a question. He couldn't answer it. The same thing happened here. The same thing happened with the whale stuff. They were not trying to get the gotcha thing. They were just asking a natural question. And you'll see things that don't exist when you're searching for certainty. That is the only way that you can get Lucy to stand upright, is if you want her to. The only way that you can have whale evolution is if you want to. But there's another problem when you're searching for certainty. When you're searching for certainty, you also will not see things that do exist. You will not see things that do exist. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, dinosaurs died out when? 64 million years ago, give or take a day or two, right? So they're all gone, right? Man came about. Lucy would tell us what? 100,000 years ago, maybe even less than that. So earliest dates for mankind, say 70, 80,000 years ago. Dinosaurs all died out because of the asteroid that hit the world somewhere down in Mexico and killed all of the dinosaurs on the world. That even the ones in Siberia, I mean, that's one heck of a asteroid. 64 million years ago. 64 million years ago, take out 50, 60,000 years. Do you have anything left over? A little bit, right? So how do you explain this? These were made in the earlier than actually these here were made, they're saying at the latest would be like the 1500s, at the latest. Probably much earlier. But not 64 million years ago. What does this look like? These are cave drawings in Utah. Or a Apatosaurus or something like that, some saurus, right? Yeah. What do you have right next to this guy? Next to Dino here, up there? You got a human being. How can this be? How about this guy from Peru? Around the turn of this right around the ADBC type yes.
That's T-Rex.
It'd be a T-Rex, yeah. Who's he hanging with? Somebody that doesn't exist at the time. How? How did they know this? There is an explanation I'll tell you in just a second. It really is kind of interesting. That, how about this guy from the 300s? Looks a little bit like a Triceratops. How about these guys they're about 2,000 years old? Found in Mexico. You know the explanation? I'm not kidding. I am not making this up. The scientist said that the reason that they were able to make this. Now, one of these guys, I think it's the guy in the middle there on the right. They didn't even know that he existed until 1964 or something. So nobody even knew that it existed. So the thing is that nobody's seen anything like that. His explanation was that in the evolutionary and the cosmic consciousness, they knew that these dinosaurs existed, and so they made these shapes and they made this art based on something that was in the universal consciousness.
That's a true statement.
That's in Science magazine.
The what consciousness?
The cosmic consciousness, the evolutionary process.
Is that like the internet?
Yeah, this was before Al Gore, so who knows? I mean, we just don't know. That, and I mean, the thing is, people read this stuff and they're going, yeah, that's it. Because I ask these questions all the time. Well, what is this? They say, well, Dan, there is no record of any dinosaurs in the 9th century or 10th century and all that. I said, really? They said, yeah, there's no mention of a dinosaur anywhere. I said, well, maybe it's because the word wasn't invented until the 19th century. The middle of the 19th century, dinosaur simply means big scary lizard. But you know what we do have? We have dragons. What does anybody remember?
All kinds of men later they're out.
Yeah, the flag of Wales. What's on it? Our British history here. The flag of Wales.
I don't know.
It's a dragon on it. Of all of the years in the in the Chinese constellation or whatever, the year of the rabbit and all that kind of stuff, only one quote unquote mythical creature, and that's the dragon.
I'm sorry. I understand what you're saying.
Yes. On the flag of Wales is a dragon. That they have you got was it St. George? Yeah, you took out the dragon. They've got, they have pictures throughout all of England. There are some really insane things, engravings in churches over I used to love to go to churches because people are buried in the floors and all that. You go downstairs, Germany, sometimes they had windows and you can actually see them looking back. That's a little freaky. But the thing is, they would have these sarcophagi in the floor, and there's something that actually had that had dragons on them, intertwined.
Stephanie, like, really? Like, seriously, question mark?
Yeah, really, seriously. It was weird, yeah. But the point is this, is that when he asked the question, why would they do this? I don't know. Because you won't, and the reason is because we wrote them off. They died off at 64 million years ago. How can these guys be there? They're dead. They're gone. Nobody has ever seen them. Well, then where did they get this? They're gone. They died. I said, but they're there. No, they're not. I said, what are you looking at? I mean, these are not the only, 8 of them. There's tons of these things out there. Yeah.
This, I think, is the bigger problem with certainty, is the inability to integrate new information.
Yeah.
The scientific method works because you integrate new information. Until you don't.
Yes. Yeah, and we look at, where else do we see those guys? Well, in Job chapter 40, verses 15 to 18, it says, look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, what power in the muscles of his belly. His tail sways like a cedar. The sinew of his thighs are close knit, and his bones are tubes of bronze, and his limbs are like rods of iron. In the NIV, in the notes at the bottom, it says that this could possibly be a hippopotamus. What power in his muscle, his tail sways like a cedar. You ever seen a hippopotamus tail? It's just a little finger. If that's a cedar, it's a sapling. But it does look something like this. He's describing. I love that somebody asked Ken Ham once that. Yes. Somebody asked, and actually this guy's actually been found within the last 10 years. It's huge. It's the biggest dinosaur ever found. Found in America someplace. I can't remember where. South America. Yeah. Yeah. And we go to the coelacanth, other kinds of things. So the point is that you won't see things that do exist. And yeah, it's a problem. Both of these are a big issue. If you're gonna see things that don't exist, and if you don't see things that do exist, and if you're gonna hold on to what you believe, there's only one thing left. And so I'm going to say something
This is the issue that Galileo bumped up with.
Yes.
He had a piece of information that didn't fit the cosmology of the day, and the church was unwilling to integrate it into their understanding because they were certain and it supported their position.
Yeah, and so what you're left with is when you're searching for certainty, you'll contaminate or eliminate the evidence.
This happens on social media
all the time. This happens in our world all the time. We'll talk about that in just a second. I'm going to run through this really, really fast. I want to get to why this matters today and why it's important for us to know so that we can talk to people. Okay, so there were some issues that people had. Is that in the fossil record, you find all kinds of things. Okay, you find something like this. This would be, I'm not even going to try to tempt these guys. Mesolimulus walchi, that was for you, Steph. And now in these words, the first part is the genus, and the second part is the species, right? So I would have, I used to joke, I had Bombus felinicus, bum cat. And, okay, and typically when you're looking at any animal, whatever it is, it comes out the genus first, and then you have the species. Okay, so this is a dinosaur error. Okay, Mesolimulus walchi. Okay, this, however, is a modern sand crab. Limulus polyphemus. You know what they did? They changed the name. That's all they did. And you can say that there are no Mesolimulus walchi. You cannot find them in the world today. I will agree with that. And the reason you can't find them is because they changed the blinking name. I can find these guys. Yeah. How about these guys? Nautiluses. Right? This is an old, you can barely read that. I'm going to attempt to use this. This is a dinosaur era Nautilus. That's all the parts of it, right? And this is what? This is this is extinct dinosaur era fossil. It's a Chronaris, whatever, something or other. And so what we do have are these, Nautilus and that. It's the same thing. They just changed the name. Here we have a dinosaur era lobster. We don't have any of those anymore. You can't find them anywhere. Nowhere. They're extinct. They're gone. But you know what we do have? We have this guy. We just changed the names. And therefore people can say, these are extinct, they don't exist anymore. Yeah. We contaminate the evidence. Well, as it gets even worse, we'll unpack a little bit more. Is almost done here. Mammals, of course, we know, evolved after dinosaurs. After dinosaurs died out, right? Big ball of rock hit the world, killed all of the dinosaurs. So now mammals can come up. Here's some problems. Is that mammals are not all that rare in dinosaur rock layers. For example, just one section of a Jurassic rock formation, there were 43 different species of animals were found. Nearly 300 genus groups of mammals have now been found in dinosaur rock layers, and many of the genera have more than one species. Beavers, otters, cows, in dinosaur rock layers. Somebody was asked about that, why don't you say anything? And he said, because I don't care about mammals. I only care about dinosaurs. And so they throw them aside. And you can go through every bit of fauna, everything that we have today, ferns, oak trees, everything else, all living at the same time as dinosaurs. So, of course, what happened to the dinosaurs? You want to write this down. They died. There were dinosaurs on the ark. I'm sure that not all dinosaurs were huge. And they died. There are places in the world today, in South America, there are places in Africa, where folks describe animals. This was in Australia, where they will describe animals that sound an awful lot like a dinosaur. These would be indigenous people who haven't been through Wikipedia, who haven't been through school. They just describe what's there. We won't see what does exist. Which brings us to the important question here. Why is this so important to us? And in the last 20 minutes, I want to talk about this. Well, first of all, let me throw it out to you guys. Besides the fact that hopefully you found this interesting, why would this be important for us to go through this? Okay.
This is, by the way, one of the reasons I didn't pursue a scientific career. I had a friend here at the church who was involved in the watchtower business.
Okay.
We overrode the scientific method to get results from it. But when you have an agenda, you chuck out data.
Yes. Yeah.
And at that point, science becomes no longer science.
Yes. Here's the thing, folks, is that when we're looking at things, truth matters. This is what's going on in our world today. Okay? It is exactly what we're talking about here. Okay? We have a virus. We have a virus that was manufactured. It's a bad virus. It's treatable. It has always been treatable. They have known it's treatable. We're not allowed to. In America, it is illegal to treat COVID-19. Doctors are losing their licenses for having the nerve to treat it. Anything other. Okay, when somebody comes down with COVID in America, this is the protocol. This is the protocol. Go home, isolate. When you can't breathe, go to the hospital. We'll give you a remdesivir that we know doesn't work, that ruins.
You gotta be on 8 liters of oxygen before they give you remdesivir.
Yeah.
Until then, only O2 and steroids.
Yeah, and we want to give you the steroids that work. So the idea is that basically we don't treat it. That is the protocol. That is the official protocol in America. Do not treat. Jane's sister had COVID. She got kicked out of the hospital 3 times because she wasn't sick enough. She asked for medication. We don't have any medication. Her son is a pastor at a church in Virginia, sent her some ivermectin. She got some, thankfully on time, and she's doing fine. We're not allowed to treat it. This is the part that's the part that is so irritating to me, is that we have a drug that won the Nobel Prize in 2015. The Nobel Prize. It's given to children, infants. And we are told it's not safe. That's bull. We have just been told now, once they found out that aspirin is actually a good treatment for COVID, within 24 hours, the New York Times has an article out there telling people who are fighting and have heart problems to stop taking aspirin. Folks, that's evil. So what do we give people? We give people masks. Masks don't work. There's not one study out there that shows us a mask works. We would social distance. They don't work either. None of that works. How do we know this? Well, you want to find out what doesn't work? Just find out what the government says we should do. Find out what does work, you find out what the government says you can't do. Singular works on it. Pepcid works on it, if you get it early. And my question is, we're not that dumb here in America. Why in the world are we going out there and saying we have dozens and dozens of studies all over the world except in America? It's amazing. Ivermectin works everywhere in America, everywhere in the world except America. America, Britain, and what's the other place that they're not allowed to treat it? Canada. Works everywhere else except there. Early treatment works everywhere except in America, Britain, and Canada. It's crazy. Why is that? Because people are searching for certainty rather than truth. And you have doctors who have treated literally tens of thousands of patients who are losing their license because we have idiots who are politicians who haven't treated anybody in 25 years who are whores in front of the camera and saying this is what we've got to do. And people do it because we're searching for certainty, not searching for truth. And what happens is you see things that don't exist. We have a vaccine that we know doesn't work. Among military folks at Johnson & Johnson, after 7 months, 3% efficacy. In Britain right now, Pfizer, negative 141% efficacy. In Massachusetts, at the end of September, there were 80 deaths that week. 52% of them were double vaxxed. The following week, it was 60%. It's getting worse and worse and worse. Vaccinated people are the ones who are spreading the thing out there, but we're holding on to it. We're seeing things that don't exist. The data is there, and we don't see things that do exist, like early treatment that works.
So what's the certainty?
The certainty is that the government is right. I mean, it's ultimately, the whole thing out here is, it's a religious perspective. It's easier to hear things because, again, faith comes by hearing, right? That's a truth right out of Romans. Hearing by the word of God. The concept that faith comes by hearing is a concept that all commercials are built on. If you hear it enough, it must be true. How do you kill 6 million people? You tell them a lie. That's how Hitler did it. And then he went at it slowly. We'll take out the first bit for public health. We'll take out all the infirm, people like me who are stutterers. We'll take them out. We'll kill them first for the public good. Who was the second group he took out? The pastors, the clergy, the folks who stood up against him. That was the second group. Why was that? Because they were the rebel rousers who were getting in the way. Third group of people, the deviants, the homosexuals, and so on. Take those out. Everything is fine. The Jews were the fourth group. We hear about the fourth group. You can't get the fourth group until you get the first three. Just because Hitler needed someone to hate. He didn't think that the Jews were actually human beings, so he didn't want to feed them. That's why he killed them. Ultimately. But he couldn't get people to say okay to that. I knew a lot of Nazis when I lived in Germany. They were nice people. Very nice people. Sat back there and did nothing because again, the certainty was, and the thing is, I talked to somebody who was a good friend of mine. I was at her wedding. I set up for her wedding as a chaplain's assistant. She would sit there and she would argue with me for hours that Hitler was a great guy. Goebbels was the bad guy. Hitler was great. He just wanted to make things better. He wanted to give them. Remember, yeah, this is for everybody on there. If you mumble, nobody hears it. He wanted to make things better, is what he said. But it comes down to the idea of searching for truth versus searching for certainty. Now, here's the thing: if we actually cared about truth, you would get Peter McCullough, and you would get other folks out there who have been treating patients. And then you would get them with the other folks together and say, why don't you guys get together in a room and why don't you guys start talking? Not allowed. Not allowed at all. It's crazy. This stuff matters, folks, because we don't do the work. I've gotten in a lot of trouble with my colleagues over the last year and a half. I believe that they're lazy and I think that they're cowards. I've had no problem telling them that. The data's there. CDC data is really good. What comes out of it is really bad. But the data's there. Portal.ct.gov, outstanding data. Doesn't support one thing that we're doing. Not a one. Portal.ct.gov, look at the actual raw data. The CDC.gov, World Health Organization. Their data is good. What comes out of it is horrible. I mean, here's the thing. We have this thing out there right now, right? That we have an FDA-approved vaccine. No, we don't. Pfizer's not FDA approved. Don't believe me? Call Pfizer. It's on my Facebook page. I posted the phone number. Call them. On the recorded line, it tells you the licensed Comirnaty, which is not available in America. It's not available anywhere in the world. That's the one that's licensed. The Pfizer is legally distinct, it says, and it's authorized. Why is that? Because you can't sue them when they find out they're killing people. We do not have an FDA-approved vaccine that is available today. It's a lie. Pfizer. That's according to Pfizer. They used fetal tissue, human embryo kidney from batch 290 something. That came from Pfizer, emails from Pfizer. You won't hear it anywhere. Why is that? Because we're searching for certainty rather than searching for truth. The truth is there. We have to look for it. Right now, folks, we've had hundreds of thousands of people in America who have died who did not need to. They have known how to treat this thing since last March. And they won't do it. I don't know why. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, whatever it is. I think it's just money, whatever. I don't know. I'm not going there. All I can look at the data is the fact they know it. They won't do anything about it. They know the vaccines don't work. They know the vaccines are killing people. My daughter ended up in the ER from getting a vaccine. Neurological damage, still has it. Yeah. What's that? It's getting better. She'll always have it. It's in her legs. It was swelling and stuff like that. It's fairly common. Anywhere in America, of course, it's you have to go outside of this to find any of this information. Best information in the world coming out of Britain. They're the most transparent. Good data coming out of the Brits. That Rob was very sick. We had lockdowns. Lockdown would have lasted 2 weeks longer. My wife would be dead right now. That's what her doctor told me. We could not get an appointment for 2 months because nobody would see her because of the lockdown for a virus that was treatable, and they knew it.
Do you have any websites for the British information?
Yeah, follow me on Facebook. You'll see all kinds of stuff. It's readily available. It's all there. Even in Google, it's harder on Google because Google does a lot of they hide a lot of things. It's all over there. DuckDuckGo, yes, good stuff. Follow Daniel Horowitz, Conservative Review. Will give you a lot of stuff. The information's out there. But again, here's the point. Okay, I don't want to get on the political side of this. I just want to look at this. It's a very real issue. Okay, I'm a counselor. I counsel counselors. Okay, they're going through it. Okay. In my own life, I've seen the fallout of this. Joel needed to see somebody. We couldn't get him in to see anybody for months because the only counselors that were actually seeing patients were his father and his father's best friend. Neither one of us can do it. We couldn't get him an appointment. Okay, I mean the thing is, there are thousands of people who are dying. And we're not allowed to treat them. Why is that? Because why do the people go along with that? Smart people. Because we're searching for certainty. We're not searching for truth. And we don't take the word. We take the word again. Whichever side, Fox News, whatever side of the aisle that we're on, we'll take the word of what somebody says, and if you say it long enough. How do you kill 6 million people? You tell them a lie and you tell it over and over again because faith comes by hearing. And hearing is supposed to come by the word of God, but in America, hearing comes by the news. And so this really is important stuff. And as we're talking to people about whatever it is that we're dealing with, we have to ask the question, are we going to search for the truth? No matter where the truth leads us. Okay, so that's why I can say, for about 3 months, the therapeutics they never stopped anybody from actually getting COVID or transmitting it. It's never been the case. It's much worse as far as transmitting. If I actually felt that masks work, I'd make vaccinated people wear masks. Because, that's where it's getting spread. What's that? Yeah, but again, the thing is that we need to make sure that whatever we're doing, that we're searching for the truth. And we're talking to people that we don't agree with. So I looked at the data, and the data for about 3 months is pretty good. And it really was. For about 3 months, 4 months, it was really good. I had no problem saying that. I'm not a preventative vaccine kind of guy. I've had COVID. The odds of me getting it again are 0.02%. And of actually getting sick on that are statistically it doesn't even exist. There is no upside on that. Again, they all know that. Natural immunity, you won't hear about it. Everybody knows natural immunity is far superior. You'll never hear about it. But the point is that, I mean, the first ones is that I had, older folks, and you got to look at the cost benefit kind of stuff. And if somebody's in their, 70s, or somebody has a ton of comorbidities or something like that, yeah, you've got a better chance with the vaccine than you do with the virus. Get the vaccine. So I'm not anti-vax. So please don't hear that. Okay, because I'm not. I'm in favor of informed consent, and I think that they do a good job for a certain group of people, not for everybody, especially for young people. For young people, it's criminal. That is child abuse to give kids this thing. They have no chance. 500 people have died. There was actually NASA, and I'll end with this. NASA actually came out with a study. There's a big asteroid somewhere out there that they came up with the percentages of what it would take for an asteroid to hit the Earth and kill everybody on it. We have a better chance of that happening than a 17-year-old dying of COVID, according to the statistics. 500 deaths in America under the age of 18 since COVID began. And that's with COVID. That's not of COVID. That's with COVID. Folks, we've had more kids hit by cars and died than died of COVID. They don't spread the virus. They're not vectors of it. They're not in danger from it. They're not vectors for spreading it. And what do? We put them in a diaper and send them to school. Why? And why do we put up with that? Because we're searching for certainty. We're not searching for truth. And there's not enough people pushing back. So that's the reason I harp on it. I'll get off of the soapbox now. This was the case with Galileo. This was the case with the folks that were translating the Bible into English. Was it one of the martyrs? His final words were, God opened the King of England's eyes. That Latimer and somebody else, one of the first martyrs, were burned at the stake. 2 days ago would have been was the anniversary. So this is not a new thing. This has gone on forever. And you had people, thankfully, you had folks like Galileo and others, Copernicus, who had the guts to stand up there and say, no, what you're saying is wrong. And we found out later, that they were right. A lot of farmers are really glad that Matt Jenks stuck it out, because we have drought-resistant corn and so on because of the work that he and his team did. All because he believed that God had a purpose. And so he couldn't get funding, got laughed at, all kinds of things. This is not just here. It's been a history throughout the world. And it's just something that, if something new comes up over and over again, and let's say we saw it in the 30s in Germany, that was led about, we saw it in the 20s here in America, and so on. That there's been, when you're searching for certainty versus truth, bad things tend to happen. And fortunately, in the course of the world, you've had people tended to be in the church who stood up and said, no, this is wrong. The problem we have right now is that the church has given up. We're actually a part of the problem. So anyway, on that happy note, any thoughts or questions as we end up? Next week, we're going to take a look at, we're going to continue the evolutionary thing. We're going to talk about racism next week. So I'm actually going to show a video from Dr. Rob Carter, because I could tell you all the same data that he's going to tell you. He's just better at it. So we'll watch the video, then we'll talk about it afterwards. But we're going to talk about, in kind of in the same vein here, and we'll start talking about racism, where the problems are, how we bring truth to that. And so that's kind of where we're going to go. And then we'll take a look, I'll also do a video on genetic entropy, because even though I've read the book 4 times, I'm still not that good at mathematics. I'm not that good at mathematics to actually explain it, so we'll let the guy who invented the gene gun talk about it for us, and then we'll talk about it. So anyway, any other thoughts or questions as we end up? Yes?
So when you say searching for certainty instead of searching for the truth,
yes.
I kind of like that video with Lucy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And trying to make the pieces fit.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that, okay.
Yeah, I mean that's what they're seeing in Australia right now, where they're the land of the free down there, where they're beating the crap out of people for going outside. Oh, in Australia, they're like beating the crap out of people going outside.
They're going outside.
Oh, yeah.
Why, they're under house arrest?
Pretty much, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, Melbourne, New South Wales, pretty much complete. It's worse than when I was in Germany, and what I heard about from East Germany is worse than that. Show me your papers, all that kind of crap. Oh yeah, bad. West side of Australia, nothing.
The country's bipolar.
Well, no, just if you go to Perth and all that, you have to go through a whole bunch of like snake-infested places to get there. Nobody wants to go there. So in Perth, they don't really care. That they handle things very, very differently. No masks, no lockdowns, no anything in Perth. Lots of ones in Melbourne. Sydney just came off of a major lockdown. But we're talking lockdown. We're talking you can't leave your house. If you go out in your backyard, you could be arrested. Oh yeah. Of course, we don't show any of that here, but it's out there if you find it. And you got riots right now in Italy, France. You got hundreds of thousands of people against vaccine mandates out there. You'll never see it on a news network here anywhere. I've seen the videos. They're out there. Not hard to find them. Searching for certainty versus searching for truth. You won't see things that do exist. So, anyway, yeah.
As I said, COVID is only one.
Yeah, it's just one part. Yeah, it's the one that's out there right now, and that's why I can't handle it so much.
There are others that are out there right now.
Yeah.
There are others that have been out there for a while. The whole question of, are there more than two genders?
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, you take God's perspective, there's two, and therefore, if someone doesn't fit the current definition, are they something else? No, they're just different.
Yeah.
So, a girl who's into sports is not a boy. A guy who is not into sports is not a girl, unless you have some rigid definitions that you set down first.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, well, there's only two genders.
Yeah.
So that you've got the certainty that if you have to be this way to be male, you have to be this way to be female, that leads to all kinds of different possibilities if you don't conform.
Well, yeah, and that's when you come back down to it, you look at the fact, okay, well, again, we're back to perspective. What's the perspective? Okay, and that's the thing. And yeah, it's out there all the time. When you jettison truth, which we have done over the last maybe 30 years, in America anyway, in the West, we jettison truth. Truth doesn't exist anymore. Truth is what you want it to be. Once you do that, the next step of coming up with certainty, you end up with all kinds of bizarre stuff. And you get in a conversation with somebody. And that's why what I have found, and this is anecdotal, but what I have found is that coming from this, when I talk to somebody, I want to find out, are we actually interested in truth? And then we can have a conversation. You can change my mind. Okay, I mean, the efficacy of when the vaccine first came out, I had a conversation with somebody, changed my mind on that. Why was that? Because they showed me the data. I mean, it was there. It's good. It's good stuff, you know. And so for older folks, or if you have got tons of comorbidities and all that, yeah, that's the right dice you want to roll. No problem with that. But we had a conversation with somebody who would actually talk to me. And so we can look at that. Let's find out what the truth is. So they're bringing data. I'm bringing data. We're looking at the data together. We're saying, oh, I see what you're saying over here. What I'm looking over here doesn't actually contradict that. It just talks about something else. So you can change your mind.
I have a friend who runs in politics.
Yeah.
She will not accept certain sources. If it came from Fox News, it cannot possibly be true.
Sure.
And so somebody will present, well, I don't accept your source. Well, okay, fine, we can't talk.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is,
we're not willing to accept certain data.
Well, and the other thing is, the fact is that I actually had somebody say that as well. I posted something, and and the Ministry of Propaganda didn't like the guy, and so they just did a major hit piece on him. I said, I'm not arguing that at all. Is what he said true or not? Well, yeah, what he said is true. So, okay, I don't understand the problem is. Because I
like the source that reported it.
Well, exactly. So I don't really care about the source. Is the data true? Okay, and that's what I said. I said, you cite the CDC all the time. They stopped doing science a long time ago, but every once in a while they're right. I'm good with that. But so I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater here. Is the fact that their data is right. That's what I say. I get a lot of data from the CDC because their data is fantastic. Just the stuff that comes out of their mouth based on the data has no bearing on the data. But it's and that's the same thing is true, across the board. Is the fact that you have to sometimes you have to look for it. I mean, deaths and all that, because they will not tell you what if somebody in Connecticut to try to find somebody who if somebody died, if they were vaccinated or not vaccinated, you cannot find that information here in Connecticut. Kind of like when I called the Department of Health in Hartford and asked what the viral threshold was for a positive PCR test. I talked to 3 epidemiologists, none of them knew. So you're telling me you're an epidemiologist working for the Department of Health in Hartford, you don't know what the viral threshold is? It's a 2-digit number. Yeah, we don't know what it is. So who does? I don't know. So in Connecticut, if somebody's vaccinated, the threshold is 23. If you're not vaccinated, the threshold is 45. Which means they're actually testing at about a 4,000 or 5,000 times for somebody who's unvaxxed versus somebody who's vaccinated. The 23 is the right number. The 45 is ridiculous, but I do know that. But I tried for months to find out what the actual number was. Nobody knew. Politicians knew, just nobody who was actually doing medicine knew. I talk to doctors all the time. What do you do if somebody has COVID? Oh, we just send them home. So do you want to treat them? There is no approved treatment. So that's not what I asked you. You want to treat them? Nope.
Well, they are certain about one thing and that's that if you do treat them, they malpractice.
Yeah, it's issues. But again, the thing is, the reason we're in the mess is because we have been too careful. This happens in churches as well. This is not just out there. I have had many people that tell me. Okay, now if somebody has been vaccinated, the cycle-viral threshold for a vaccinated person on a PCR test is around 23. Could be 24, somewhere in there. If somebody is unvaxxed, the cycle-viral threshold is 45, which is on a couple thousand times if you test long enough, you're going to find something. So that's why you have so many cases of people who are unvaxxed versus people who are vaccinated. The 23 number is probably the right number. The Germans found out that you're not contagious, and the odds of you getting sick if you're 24 or less. 24 or higher. It gets less and less you go out there. So that 23, 24 seems to be the number. So the Germans used to test at 30 to be conservative. That makes sense to me. 45 doesn't make sense.
So what does this number represent? The number of times?
Cycles, exactly, yeah.
What's in the tube?
Yeah.
To find out if there's a virus.
Something like that, yeah. So it's just, unless you get smaller pieces. So like I said, the Germans decided, they found out at like 23, 24, somewhere in there, they tested at 30 to be conservative. That's reasonable to me. Testing at 45, or some places in Minnesota were testing at 50, which means that if you walked by somebody who had COVID, you'd probably test positive. So, because they needed the caseload up. So then it was all about cases. Now it's all about deaths. And so for example, now, we first started out that 99% of the deaths were unvaccinated. It's down to 90% now. And the reason for that is because they count unvaccinated all the way back to a year and a half when it started, when nobody was vaccinated. So you get all those numbers. But if you do it on a week-to-week basis and you start to see the trend lines, we're talking right now in Israel, 85% to 90% of the deaths are vaccinated right now. I'm really concerned about our vaccinated folks. This is going to be a difficult winter, and I am concerned. I'm hoping What I'm hoping in the Northeast, especially in Connecticut, that King Ned, may he reign forever, that he did such a horrible job of handling it the first time around that we have more herd immunity, of natural immunity, than what we thought. But unfortunately, the vaccination is actually hurt. If you get one shot, if you have natural immunity, you get one shot, it doesn't do anything for you, good or bad. You get the second shot, it actually takes away your T-cell immunity. And so the vaccine actually hurts people who have natural immunity. So they know this, they just won't talk about it. So, but I am hoping that because he did such a horrible job the first time around, that maybe we have enough natural immunity in Connecticut that it won't be that bad. So, it's possible. It's possible. I'm an optimist. What's that? We are, yeah. Just something to keep in mind out here, and I will actually close with this because we're actually late. Sorry, Michael, we're late. But what you want to watch is the flu. So in places where, because this is a way how God sets things up, which again, truth versus certainty, right? If you start with God, then there's no place on the planet, in the history of the planet, where there have been two major viruses at the same time. That's why there was no flu last year. So the conspiracy theorists who say that COVID is just the flu, they're wrong. COVID is nasty. Okay? Take it seriously. It's bad. Okay? It's treatable. And if you're younger, the younger you are, the better. If your vitamin D level is over 50 and all that, you don't have much to worry about, whatever it is. But no, it's really bad. I don't want anybody ever to say I don't take it seriously. I take it very seriously. Okay, but like I say, it is treatable, and then it doesn't have to be a death sentence. It's not the flu. Okay, the flu, you can let it go, whatever it is, you're probably going to be okay. No, this you let go. I tell people all the time, if you think you got a cold, treat it like you got COVID, because it's going fast right now. It's getting a lot faster. That's what Delta does, especially for those who are vaccinated are carrying a much higher viral load, like 250 times the viral load if somebody is unvaxxed right now. There is no such thing as asymptomatic spread among the unvaxxed. Among the vaxxed, there is. It's not their fault, but it's there. And so we need to be aware of that. So, but the flu, because of viral interference, you won't see it too. So like right now in India, there are places in India that are having really bad flu seasons. That's really good news. I mean, not for those who get the flu, but it really is good news because that means that COVID is pretty well done. Right now in America, the only place that we're early in the season, the only place in America right now that's having an uptick in flu is Mississippi. And they're in the yellow zone right now. They're not red, they're in the yellow zone. Everybody else is bright green. Mississippi is actually the lowest vaccinated state in the U.S. Number like the lowest or the next to lowest somewhere there. I think West Virginia might still be lowest, but that's good for that's actually good news for them. So I'm watching the flu info every day, hoping it goes up, and that's just because, like I say, the more flu comes up, that means that COVID is going down, and I would much rather deal with the flu than COVID, because COVID is nasty. And so like I say, make sure we take it seriously. I mean, you had it, you know that. I was blessed. It wasn't quite so bad. Again, I took the advice of the people who were treating it, and I treated it the same way that they were told me to treat it, not the way the government told me to treat it, and I had a very, very mild case. I was very fortunate on that. But Jane's uncle just passed away of it. Her sister was very, very sick and all that. So yeah, I mean, so I say I'm not in any way, shape, or form taking it lightly. It's nasty. We want to make sure we keep our folks as safe as we can. But, God is still on the throne. He's still in control. There have been plagues before. There will be plagues again. And so we do want to, put our trust in him. And, also, like I say, take good care of ourselves. Get your vitamin D. 5,000 IUs every day. Keep it up. A little magnesium, if we're on the north side of 19, take a little bit of magnesium, helps it come in a little more. So I'll actually find out tomorrow what my levels are, so I'm pretty excited about that. Anyway, someone want to close this in prayer next week? We'll take a look. Next week we'll tackle racism with the same principle here, and why it's such a, even the concept is stupid. And so, again, trying to look at truth as opposed to certainty, and we'll find out both sides of the aisle, on either side of the spectrum, are bizarre. We don't want to even buy the premise, and then we'll talk about why that is next week. So, somebody want to close the prayer? Anybody? Me? Okay, I will close the prayer. Freddie said I would do it. So, Father, I thank you. I thank you so much I thank you that Jesus is the truth, that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that he said that we'll know the truth, and the truth will make us free. Whatever that truth is, it will always make us free. And Father, I pray that we would think through the implications. And I know that the illustrations and the practical side, that can tie us up. And I don't want that to happen. And Father, I pray that we would look through the principles of the idea that if we're searching for certainty, we'll see things that don't exist. We won't see things that do exist. And we'll be tempted to want to get rid of those people or those things that don't agree with us. And Lord, we don't want to do that. We want to be purveyors of truth because we are the followers of the one who is the truth. So I pray that you would guide us, sustain us, and as we continue to look through a bunch of super hot button issues over the next couple of weeks and months, that we would have a lot of fun, that we would give each other grace, and Lord, that you would be glorified in all that we say and do. And Lord, I give you the praise and I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So, all righty. And we are